In today's episode, we look at the true story behind Nightmare on Elm Street. On November 16th of 1984, what was destined to become one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and what would help make the slasher genre what it is today, would be released. The name of this movie, Nightmare on Elm Street, written by Wes Craven, with a star-filled cast with the likes of Johnny Depp and others. Nightmare on Elm Street focuses around Midwest teenagers who fall prey to the horrifying burned Freddy Krueger, played by Robert Englund. Freddy goes after his prey in their dreams, and if he gets you in your dream, he gets you in the real world. And it is the inspiration behind this dynamic that we will take a dive into. Mr. Craven, during an interview, would tell what gave him the inspiration for Nightmare on Elm Street. He points to an article that was published in the LA Times. He retells the story of a Cambodian refugee child who was too scared to fall asleep, as he thought he would be killed in his dreams and never wake again. The child would eventually fall asleep, with his parents being overwhelmingly happy, thinking the issue was finally behind them. They would be greatly mistaken, however, when they heard their son scream in the middle of the night. Rushing to get to him, they would become horrified, as by the time they reached him, he had already passed, dying in the nightmare, the thing he feared the most. The article that Craven described in his interview was all too real. This also was not just a one-time isolated event. In the 1980s, dozens of Southeast Asian refugees would all sadly die from an unknown reason. This mysterious disease would only target men in their 20s and 30s that was a part of the Hmong ethnic group. The disease would eventually affect enough of the Hmong, putting public health experts on alert. This all took place in the United States, hurting the people that had just relocated from Laos, a small landlocked country in Southeast Asia. They had fled their country due to 30,000 Hmong soldiers helping the Americans in the loss of the Vietnam War. So due to this, the ethnic group Hmong was seen as traitors to their country, and they had to flee to find safety. This brings us to the story of young Ling Tao, one of the refugees who was relocated to the United States. Tao came with his wife and his 8 young children. Tao had been up one night watching TV with his uncle. He would eventually retire to bed next to his wife in the early hours of the morning. He would accidentally and briefly wake his wife up, but he and her would both fall asleep quickly. Later that night, though, Tao's breathing became overwhelmingly labored, so loud that he would actually wake his wife up yet again. She shook him repeatedly in an attempt to wake him from his nightmare, probably hoping this moment was actually just a nightmare that she needed to wake up from herself. But slowly she realized that she could do nothing, and she had to accept the reality that her 47-year-old husband was no longer with her. This mystery as to what killed these people would never really be solved. Investigators could find no medical explanation for these deaths. This led to many believe perhaps it was a chemical nerve agent that the soldiers of the Vietnam War were exposed to. Though doctors do not support this idea, that's because nerve gas does not act this way. This mysterious killer only affects males, and nerve gas does not discriminate. The Hmong would have their own ideas, though, pointing to spirits being angry and upset that their ancestors had left their homeland. This phenomenon would ultimately be called Sudden Unexplained Nocturnal Death Syndrome, or for short, SUNDS. The CDC would get involved as to try to find and give the Hmong refugees the answers that they so desperately wanted. Though the CDC too would also come up empty-handed. And what killed these people will forever be a mystery. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Also, a like wouldn't hurt you either.